cannot have any duct tape where the two sheets of a blue board come together. Once again, here's our sewer cap clean out. It's elevated. As we said yesterday, one of the last things the contractor will do is reduce this down to ground level. We keep it up to prevent a backhoe, anybody knocking it over or getting debris in. It's always got to be capped at all times during construction phase. The framing crew assembles the walls and the floor of the slab, then raise them into place. Kind of looks like, if you've ever seen it done, raise the American flag at Mount Suribachi there in Iwo Jima. Usually takes 3 guys, one in each end, one in the middle. They'll build the walls and bring it into place and secure it. Now, we're here in the garage, and the walls in the south are made of 2x4 lumber and either 9-foot or 8-foot lengths for your studs. Now, up north, they have to use 2x6 lumber to hold the weight of the snow, but all times in the south, we use 2x4s. Now, as you're aware, 2x4s are placed on 16-inch centers. That means the center of one 2x4 is exactly 16 inches from the other 2x4 at a minimum. Now, 2 things interrupt this process: windows and special framing that will accommodate internal walls once they're built. Now, let's take a look at our spacing here. As you can see, we'll do a little check on our studs. It should be the center of one wall, the center of one board, the center of the other board must be 16 inches. That's what it means, 16 on center, 16 OC. It is not the gap between there, but from the center of one stud to the other stud. Now, I'm walking along the garage here at the side, and I see my base plate or sole plate, which of course is treated lumber. Now, if you look at the bottom here, this is the substandard type of lumber that was used. You can see there's absolutely no hold here. You get a Force 5 hurricane, you're going to lose this structure here. Look here as well. At this stage, it'd be very hard to fix this. What you're going to have to do is tell my client to put other studs in each side of this for additional strength and nail those in, because you're just not getting it done with this. That's not even grade C lumber. That's C- lumber. Now, a little bit about lumber grades, let me mention to you. I'm a little bit suspicious here because I'm not seeing any lumber stamps. Now, if I don't see the lumber stamps in that wood, which of course tell me it's kill dry, the grade of lumber, etc., and I noticed a minute ago when we look inside, the headers were all turned away from me. When I don't see stamps, I get suspicious that they're trying to hide something from me. Now, you can see what is used to frame this house up for the studs is finger jointed studs. Not my favorite, but in a tract house, you're going to run into it. Just might as well get over it and used to it. Now, in a custom home, they should bring in fir Pacific Northwest. Obviously, here they just take the scraps and basically glue them together with the finger joints. It's been approved for this part of the country. Obviously, in earthquake areas, you're not allowed to use finger jointed studs for obvious reasons. As you can see over here, nailed to that stud, the graffiti comes to you at no additional charge, courtesy of the work crews. Obviously, that big hole that you see there in the blue board is going to have to be replaced. I guess we can give the builder a chance. He hadn't had time to come back and look at it, but it's a pretty poor job where he's knocked that in. Once again, any penetration of the blue board must be sealed off. When they brought the finger jointed studs out here, those are pretty poor grade that they got. As you can see here, the corners, a lot of notches and borings in those. They're not exactly straight. You can see them overlap here. This is not correct. You lose a little bit of strength. It's the garage. They're going to figure they'll maybe finish this wall out so you won't see it, but it's pretty poor grade. Part of our inspection always in framing is to make sure that the top plates that hold the studs in place are properly aligned. Now, you all should know that we cannot have both top plates ending over stud. You can see the one right here is ending. It's not ending over stud, it's to the right of the stud. It has to end over stud. The plate above it must offset at least 24 inches. It certainly does before it ends, but where that one below ends, it should have ended over stud. Now, I think I've got a problem with the stud here. I can see. Let me go over here and take a look at this. Well, here's what I was referring to. I could tell when I walked in here, this obviously hasn't been nailed on. This is just placed in here and is of no value. Hopefully the builders will pick this up. If not, I guarantee I'm going to have it in my report. You always do this to your studs to make sure they're properly aligned. But this is just, I can twist this here. It's poor workmanship. It's not nailed at all, just kind of placed in there. The top plate in this wall, you can see it does end correct over stud. That's how it has to be. You see those, the bottom row of top plates, how they're ending over a stud, and the one above is offset more than 24 inches. It's ending over stud, not out there in the wide open spaces. Well, if you look out here, you can see this anchor bolt's missing a washer and a nut. The red paint means this, the superintendent or the construction managers caught that with the red paint, meaning they're going to come back and put a washer or a nut on it. But our job here is to make a note of it, let our homeowner know, and hopefully they'll come take care of that for the builder will before the client closes. Well, it looks like we got another situation in the corner. You see the red paint. Looks like the superintendent's picked that up. Got another anchor bolt missing a washer and a nut. I want to talk about the anchor bolts. They're required in coastal areas. They're not required in non-coastal areas. You can have those straps. However, let me ask you to feel lucky, because if Force 5 hurricane comes up, I want my house secured with anchor bolts. Don't give me any straps that go across the boards. Once again, you can see it's treated lumber. This actually looks womanized with arsenic that's injected into the wood under pressure. They're getting away from womanized by EPA and going into more of an arsenic derivative they're putting in there, or a copper derivative to kill the fungus. Once again, by treating the lumber, it kills or delays the action of the wood rot and allows your boards to last several years. If you look to the ceiling, it looks like the builder has used what we call engineered joist. That's fine. The spacing will be dictated by the plans that are on. I don't have a copy of the plans of this house, so I have to note to tell my client I'll measure the spacing later and tell the client to get a hold of the builder's plans and make sure it has the spacing required by the engineer or architect on the house. Now, as you all know, you can make borings into these engineered joists a lot larger than can conventional frame joist. You just cannot touch the bottom or the top flange. Cannot be damaged. Now, they've already got the insulation here, so I can't tell the top. I don't see any notches or where the bottom part of the flange has been intruded on, but I'm going to have to put in a report unable to verify the top because the insulation is already in here. Looks like the builders used engineered truss here as well on a track house. That's pretty much what they've gone to. In terms of the span tables, you can just put in your report that has to be the span tables per the engineer or architect's design without a set of plans. Unfortunately, in most houses you go to, they don't give you a set of plans. We just have to tell your client to make sure the span is the same distance that's in the plans. Now, I will go and measure those for my client and tell them the distance, and hopefully get some plans and make sure that, from the builder, make sure that's correct. When they use a lot of manufactured material, has some place where there's no substitute for traditional joist. When you have your joist, you need to make sure the joist hangers are done correctly. The joist hangers have to be at least 3/4 of the depth of the board, and all the nails have to be 16D nails. Watch out for builders using roofing nails, which have big heads, as a dead giveaway. So all nail joists, the hangers have to have, every place there's an opening has to be a nail. Stepping here for a moment, they have a maniblock system installed. I'm seeing a lot of that in tract houses. It's been used in commercial for about 30 years. In the last 5 or 6 years, it's been used more and more in housing. Now, the builders give them a couple of extra outlets here. That's typical. I usually see 1 or 2. This one has 4 extra outlets. Now, here's the issue with extra outlets. You have to make sure they're capped. Basically, put your fingers in here, and I don't feel any caps here. I don't have any caps here. And that's a real issue, because all it takes is some kid or something to come in here and turn these, and you're going to have water going all the way like Niagara Falls out those. So those have to be capped off. Now, I don't have it yet, but there's a little device that turns these, and the builder usually brings this in after closing, a little key that works those very effectively rather than pliers, and they usually don't bring that out once again until after closing, just to make sure they can hang on to it. Now, something I always tell my home buyers, find out which one is coming off of your water heaters. The one problem currently with the maniblock system is they've had some problems with the lines coming off your water heaters. Check them after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks that you're in the house and using hot water, because that expansion here, sometimes you get a leak right here at these connections. So something to tell your homeowner to watch and monitor. If you have a leak, you need to have them get a hold of the builder and come back in. It's something we won't be able to check now, but once the homeowner comes in, the expansion on your hot water lines, particularly those coming from the water heater, is where you sometimes have a leak. Above our windows and doors, we mentioned earlier, we have our headers. Now, most headers are 2x10s, which are actually 2x10s with a piece of usually a 1/2 inch thick plywood sandwiched in between, and a 2x4 along the bottom. Now, the reason the headers has the plywood in the middle is simply to make the header as wide as the rest of the wall. Remember, 2x4s are actually 1.5 by 3.5. The combination of planing the boards and drying the lumber, we lose some dimension. And a 2x10 is actually basically 1.5 by 9.5. So when you sandwich two 2x10s together, they're actually only 3 inches wide. Adding a piece of plywood in the middle gives us 3.5 inches, and that's basically by using a header we come out even. Now the header is really a beam, and what you see here over the doors and windows, and it should be number 2 grade lumber, but unfortunately some builders, like the one here looks like, has turned the stamp away from me, so I can't verify that it's number 2 lumber. I'm starting to see more and more builders use number 3, and the code correctly calls for number 3 lumber, for number 2 lumber, and they're using grade number 3. I'm very suspicious, as I said, when it looks like purposely all the stamps of the lumber have been turned away from me. I don't think this is by coincidence. It's kind of a builder's trick in building tract homes to turn the lumber as a framer where the stamps can't be seen. I figure if no problem, if we can't see the stamp, I'll just have to put it's supposed to be number 2 lumber and put there unable to verify that it is number 2 because the stamp on the lumber is not showing. Part of our job, even if it's been insulated, is to pull the insulation up all the way around the interior to look at the anchor bolts. Now here he's got the bolt on, it doesn't have the washer. We've got to go all the way around, pull up the insulation and check the anchor bolts and make sure that we don't see any holes in the blue board. There should also be, and he's got across the bottom, you see the foam that's under the sole plate there, that's for insulated purposes, help him keep his N-star secure rating, and you can see that foam, that bead of foam going all the way around. That is required, and he's got a pretty good job done in that. Now, next let's go over to our windows. Windows is something we have to take time to make sure it's done correctly. You have to have the foam seal around all sides of the window. You can see he's got a bead of foam right here in this part here, which is good. Something he's doing I don't care for that much. He's basically made a top, what they sometimes like to call a shingle with the poly on the outside. He's got the bottom, that's the minimum that's required. Now it used to be, and what they still should do in custom homes, is take a piece of the poly, which is like your vapor barrier, lay it totally across the window. Now what you should do is then cut it an X across. That should leave you 4 triangles to wrap around each side of the window. That gives you much better protection than just a strip. It's basically nailed at the bottom and a strip at the top. Now what they call the shingle effect at the top with that vapor barrier you see is kind of like a shingle does, is to shed water, but just having the bead of styrofoam they have across the sides, I don't think near as good as having the basically your poly or your vapor barrier around all 4 sides wrapped around the window. The top, each side, and the bottom, you just cut the X across and wrap each of the triangles it results in around the window. I'm looking for consistency in my risers here. As you can see, I've got right about 7 3/4, which is the max you can have in a riser. I've got 7 3/4 here. Got 7 3/4 here. As you know, you cannot deviate more than 3/8 inch the whole flight of the risers. That doesn't mean 3/8 inch plus or minus, it's 3/8 inch total deviation. Now, I'm not so concerned with the height, but even though the maximum cannot be over 7 3/4, because your pad and your rug are going to add more to that, but it's consistency. If we don't have consistency in the rise, somebody's going to trip and fall. Now there's a requirement that anytime you have more than 12 risers, which you follow the camera up the stairs, you can see we have 12 here, you have to break the difference with what's called a landing. So you've gone up 3, have a landing. Now landing has to be at least 36 by 36. Well, I can eyeball that and see that's probably 42, 48 inches here. I don't need to measure. It's obviously more than 36 by 36. But if you think it's not, you need to take out your tape and make sure it is. Now, on your stair, this nosing here is required to stick out at least a 1/2 inch. And you see where it comes out over the outer board by 1/2 inch. Now the depth of the tread, which is where you put your foot, is 11 inches. Now, or it has to be a minimum of 10. Now the nosing sticks out here another inch. Anytime it's the tread is less than 11 inches, you have to have a nosing. If it was more than 11 inches, this nosing here does not have to be there. But right now it's just a tad less. It looks almost like 11, but he's gone on and put a nosing here anyway. Now, anytime you have more than 4 risers, you're required to have a grippable handrail. Now, grippable means you can put your hand there and grip it. Now, it also requires that it be between 34 and 38 inches off the stair. Now I'm going to go measure a couple points to make sure it's at least within that range above the step, or stair as we'd want to put it. Now it must be continuous, as you can see here, and also at the bottom here, it stops the newel post. It has to either return to the newel or stop at the newel post. Used to be in olden days, you had them come out, make a fancy hook. We had women catch the purse straps on those, fall backwards, so it now must either return to the newel if you make a circle. What most track builders do, it just cut off right there at the newel post, which is the post here at the bottom, the newel post. Now, I see a problem, and I'm hoping he's going to come back and correct this, because at the top of the stairs, that barrier in the stairs, you cannot have a gap of more than 4 inches. Now, let's give him credit. He has might put his spindles in here. We can't have it where more than a 4-inch wide spear could pass through there. Well, obviously now it's wider than that, but let's assume the builder's going to have to come through here and put basically the spindles in there to close that gap. I'm going to make a note, but giving the builder some slack, he hasn't the stage to put them in yet. Well, I can see just looking that this barrier here is just not going to cut it. This should have been forced with a stud down through another board to properly support it. He's going to have to do some major changes here at the bottom to properly support this. Obviously, this would give us, you can see, not much effort at all here. That little wall or barrier is going to have to be adjusted and straightened out. I'm going to give the builder some credit here. This drain basically comes off your primary AC drain, and by slanting, and a lot of builders are picking up on this, you don't hear the noise of the drip coming out of your primary drain. If this went directly down to where it intersects here, you'd have their drip, 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 drip. I've had a lot of buyers come to me about their house. They're talking about here this drip between the walls. Well, that's the problem. If it goes straight down, you'll hear the drip. If they slope it like he's done here, he's even got a little support here for it, which is good. That prevents people from hearing that drip, drip, drip noise coming off the AC drain. This is called the hot wall. This is an area where basically your hot room, where you have like your water heaters, backs up conditioned airspace, you have to have this hot wall. Now you can use that blue foam. I've heard lately that you can. It's now considered okay, but most people use the protective thermoply here on your hot wall. Now, once again, it has to be nailed where you see those marks at the bottom. Once again, those are every 3 inches. You have to have a nail no more than 9 inches apart. Sheets come together. You're going to have a tape there as well. Make a good seal. I want to have that foam across the sides at the bottom there as well to seal it off. And because the hot room has to be sealed, obviously for insulative purposes. And the reason they don't use the blue foam board there is for fire reasons. Probably your water heater is going to go back there on this side of your hot wall. At this stage, we want to look at the air conditioning heating ducts and make sure there's no excessive crimps in the line. Of course, I don't care how much power you put through. You have enough crimps in the line, it's not going to properly heat or cool that room. So we need to make sure that at this stage, make sure that we don't see any crimps in those lines. We will see mastic where the return air duct is going to be. That requires part of the energy efficiency as well. He's done a pretty good job here putting foam around his lines, and where he's gone through a board or whatever, he's got it foamed up, and that's just a good preventive measure. You also want to shut off any draft stoppages for fire reasons as well. So you want the foam there all around those openings that you have. Look here on the wall here, you can see there's foam as well going top to bottom. Those outer boards help seal us off. Now, I prefer to have a wooden door type of material over the tubs. The tubs become the urinal, the dump site of the job site. There's debris, nails, sheetrock screws, get in those. They go down the drain. If they're missing the drain cover, the plumbing will never drain properly from that point forward. So a good builder has those secured off where you don't get the debris in there. The sheetrock screws, they don't use them as urinals, etc. You can see here, this is coming up, the little protect cover they had is being knocked around. I see wood dust, see various nails around here, which are probably already down in the drain. What's kind of interesting here on the second floor, the builders use single span studs. These are 8-foot ones rather than the 9-foot one down there with the finger jointed. However, the quality isn't very good. We must have gotten a cheap price in these to put them in. And pretty cheap lumber. You can see those imperfections there. I just like good single grade lumber, grade 1 lumber on my studs. Here in this house, you can see the builder went back and scabbed over the bad honeycombing and other rough spots there on the slab, but he didn't do it all the way down. Now, if you have that much extensive work to do, you should have gone all the way down, because here at the end you have where it's no scabbing. This portion you have scabbing. It looks kind of off. Again, we're walking along the same wall here. You can see the scabbing where they didn't scab, and it gives that two-tone look. It would have been much better if you had this much wrong with it, just a scab across the entire length of it to give a consistent look. You can see some honeycombing right there over your bricks, right under that dryer vent, that vent there on the wall. Should have been scabbed over. If you're doing that much, you sure should have picked that part up as well. This honeycombing isn't that bad. You can see the effect of waiting a little bit too long for the form board, where I left a little wedge there on the side. That's why I want to get them off as soon as it's possible to do so. Let me run into when there's not a copy of the plans on site when they pour the slab. Obviously, some yahoo put an anchor bolt where the door is going to be. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to cut this anchor bolt out, resulting being you're going to be missing one anchor bolt in a critical place in the house. That's why when you have a set of plans outside, when they're pouring it, you put the anchor bolts where they're supposed to go per the plans, and you don't put them where a doorway is going to be, particularly for a crew that hasn't used that plans before for that style of house. Here's another place around the house, and in this location, the thermoply is too close to this concrete slab. Remember, 1.5 inches. This is way too low. It'll wick up water. You can see right down there, it's almost touching the slab. Got a note here. It looks like when the supervisors cut off. Well, what they're telling them is, hey guys, you went down too far. You're going to have to cut it off to give us that 1.5 inch separation there. Final comment today about new home construction inspections. Oftentimes the builder will say, well, I see your point, what you've got here, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Well, I want to reply, well, you should have gotten to it by now. However, deference to the builder, I don't know what his total schedule is. But however, I'm going to write it up, and that's my client needs to follow up and make sure the builder does do that before he closes on the home. Ceilings and walls are covered with sheets of plasterboard known as drywall or gypsum wallboard. The term sheetrock is actually a trademark of U.S. Gypsum and should only be used in referring to that brand of drywall, not as a generic name. Essentially, drywall consists of gypsum filler, commonly called plaster of Paris. It's mixed with water and poured between two sheets of specially treated paper and basically cooked in an oven to a hardness like a rock. Usually they're sold in sheets of 4 feet wide, 8 feet long. And the backing sometimes has a waxy surface, kind of like a wax paper surface that's used in bathrooms. Sometimes they call that rainboard. Now, once in place, drywall is quite sturdy. It's not as sturdy as the old plaster walls of old. The advantage of drywall is it's low cost, fire-resistant material that's basically easy to cut and work with. Now, it might not be as strong or durable as wood or plaster, but it has basically overcome most objections except poor workmanship. And that's what we're going to look for today, some things to look for on our drywall to make sure it's done correctly. Two ways to apply drywall to the walls or ceilings. One is to nail them on, which is the most common. The best way is to have the drywall screwed. It's always preferable to have the drywall installed with screws rather than nails. Nails can loosen over time, which causes cracks and sheetrocks. Most builders nail because it's quicker and therefore cheaper. Now, whether the builder uses nails or screws, the holes should be puttied up and then sanded for a smooth finish. Part of any new construction inspection is basically, or a resale as well, to look at the drywall. The most common problems are pop nails and screws. The problem becomes when the drywall wasn't fully basically fastened against the framing, when the framing timber shrinks or basically twists, or when the object dries, the wall or ceiling starts to move, the joint compound becomes loose. Another thing we're going to look at is cracks. Some small cracks basically could be from the worker's installation. We're also going to take a look at corners. Now, corners take a lot of abuse. In addition to the edge rounders that you see here, these have to be very securely secured to the frame. They also here, you don't want to go cheap in the putty. This has to be done very correctly to make sure this holds well. If you have any problem with these or damaged areas, you want to make sure you contact your builder and tell them to firstly remedy these, because this could be a serious effort. Another big requirement is to make sure that we wait at least 24 hours between painting to make sure the mud is dry. If a builder goes in and paints too soon, The builder's going to have basically problems. It's going to run. It won't ever be completely dry. A problem you have to always watch out for on a new inspection is make sure the crew hasn't covered up the electrical outlets. I see this so much it's nauseating. A good crew should always measure from the bottom up, side to side, top to top the outlet. There should be no outlet, no wall that doesn't have an outlet on it. Now, they should also be a standard size off the floor, usually around 14 inches in modern homes. So if you common problem I see in new home constructions is covering up the electrical outlets with a sheetrock or drywall. I see this so much it's almost nauseating. A good crew always measure from the bottom up, side to side, top to the top of the outlet. There should be an outlet in almost all walls. A good builder also has outlets that are approximately the same height. I don't really care if it's 14 inches or 8 inches as long as it's consistent. And you can bet if there's a long wall with no outlet, it's been covered up with sheetrock. One of the reasons builders always try to keep the site secure by locking all the windows and doors when they leave for a weekend is vandalism. As you can see here, some probably kids, just the joy of being mean, put fists through various places in this wall and did a lot of damage. This wall had already been obviously sheetrocked over. You already had the base plates in set and just vandalized it. They're not much of an artist either. They're even so stupid they put their name there, which is even dumber. And you can see they did a lot of damage here as well, and the builder's going to have to come back, rip all this stuff out. But if you ever wonder why they keep these buildings locked, this is a good example of why. They already had the cabinet ready put up when they made this continuation of damage to this house that you can see. It's going to have to probably take the cabinet off. It's a pretty hard hole to replace from that angle. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect house, but here's something they should have caught in the framing stage. As you can see, this window definitely slopes. It's not parallel. You can see how it slopes from that side to this. Something you definitely want to point out. Well, here's a fairly common problem. They probably have the wire back there for the doorbell, and when they, after this stage, realize they weren't connected up the doorbell, they have to come back in and cut it. Once again, you got to stay on top of these issues. It's a small issue, and this could be patched. But anything more than this, you almost need to take it out because it's hard to patch when it gets bigger than, let's say, a softball. Look at the sheetrock job in this house. We can see there's some awfully rough edges here. You got a saw cut here, which is wrong. This isn't properly sealed off, and need to make sure the crews come back and do a better job in this. Here, your air register, they overcut. That's very common. You want to check around your switch plates and your air vents. That's overcut. They're going to have to putty around that to correct that. Now, we're not talking about framing here in particular, but you can see damage done by subcontractors, and this sometimes sends the builders up the wall. The alarm company, I suspect, came in there and damaged the door frame and putting the alarm system in here. Obviously, they're going to have to come back out and fix that or pay the damages they've done, and something you want to check on. You always want to make sure when you're checking sheetrock, always look behind your plumbing fixtures. Your plumbers, when the first subcontractors come in, and they're not always the neatest people in the world about putting their plumbing protrusions through. As you see here, you left some big gaps in sheetrock. That's going to have to be taken care of for your client. Under a laundry room area, you can see where they've made a cut. Looks like a saw or the cutting knife right here by your switch plate, and over here is not a smooth cut around your electric dryer outlet. Once again, that's going to need to be taken care of, and the touch-up crews hopefully are going to do the job. Well, this is why the builders always want to test those water lines before they rock the wall up. Now, probably someone put in the sheetrock, put a small hole through the pipe, because you can see where they've turned off the water here and look behind the wall. You have a leak there. And they're going to have to go cut that out and make sure they've got the leak, take your insulation out, and make sure you got that repaired. We've got a water leak, looks like here. You can see where it's bubbled at the bottom. I don't know if it's part of that Manablock system, that red and blue plastic, or somewhere behind the wall. I suspect it's behind the wall, but you can see how that's all warped and bubbled up from basically a water leak. And they've had to shut off the water, and hopefully the builder will take care of that for the client. We've got a little problem here too. It looks like they're looking for the walls or the wires to put in that doorbell, and obviously that's going to have to be patched up. You run into that a lot with around sheetrock. It's not that big of a hole, but something they're going to definitely have to patch up. So this is the way the corner is supposed to be done. See where it's sealed off top to bottom? But the opposite wall over here, they haven't done that. You can see over here, you must have gone to lunch or something, but that's not sealed. And look behind me at this wall over here, it's missing a seal as well. If you look at that wall, coming down needs the same seal. What inspector needs to do is bring like a big searchlight and go down the wall, and you'll see nail pops start to happen, or any little tears that come in the sheetrock from vibration. So we'll go in another room, see if we can see any. I don't see any now, but it usually shows up after it's been painted. Well, right there you can see some examples of some nail pops, and the problem is once those have come back far out, they don't hold anymore. So those are going to have to basically be screw that in, and then you have to putty over that and texture it down. But see those nail pops? Once again, the